Thanks for joining us again. This is the Word for the Valley podcast. And in one of the most memorable moments in the Gospels, Peter steps out of a boat and onto the water. Not because he was fearless, but because he was willing. And as Pastor Mike will point out, our fellowship with Jesus is always as close as we want it to be. The limitations aren't on his end, they're on ours. And in this episode, we'll look at the kind of desire and surrender that led Peter to say, "Lord, let me come to you." And the simple, stunning response of Jesus, "Then come." Let's dive back in with Pastor Mike at verse 29.
You've oftentimes probably heard me say this, but your fellowship with Jesus is exactly as close as you want it to be. Your fellowship with Jesus is exactly as close as you want it to be. Because if there's any limitations and or restrictions, it's not on God's end. It's on our end. Some hindrance within us. Some place where we are unsurrendered or something that we don't yet know or understand. Some puzzle piece has to be placed in the right order there so we can get to the things that we claim that we really want from God. That surrender, that desire has to come first. And so Peter says, "Hey, let me come to you." And Jesus says, "Okay, then come." Now look, when Peter had come down out of the boat, now the way this is written indicates to us that this is not a little tiny rowboat. There are 12 men on this boat. 12 grown men on this boat. This isn't a dinghy, right? They would have had that thing at the bottom of the sea before this night was over. This is a significant boat in which Peter has to get down over the side and drop down off of the edge of the boat to get down to the water. He's not like he's just stepping out there on the water. It says there that he had to let himself down out of the boat. When he had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus, which means that if this does not work, he might not get back into the boat. This is still in the middle of the storm. The winds are raging. The waves are still coming up. He goes, "All right, okay, right? Let's go." Drop down. He's like, "Oh, I'm still alive. Still alive." If it doesn't work, he might not get back up, depending on how far away Jesus is from him to be able to rescue him. Right? Because there's no way John's leaning down over the side to get Peter back in the boat. That was your dumb decision. You just die there. That's the way God, whatever. I don't care about you kind of thing. There's no way they're going to risk their life to get him back in the boat. This is a danger. This is a risk to Peter that he's taking. Drops down out of the boat. And then he walked on the water. But look, to go to Jesus. To go to Jesus. The reason why he got on the water was not to walk on water. The reason why he got on the water was to go to Jesus. Jesus is not an end to miracles, meaning that he is not the reason why we do miracles. I went and listened to it again this week because this passage always reminds me of the Audio Adrenaline song, "If I Keep My Eyes on Jesus, I Can Walk on Water." Great song. Fun band, by the way. You realize how many great songs that they had. If I keep my eyes on Jesus, I can walk on water. Simple truth. Except the fact here in this account is Peter wasn't using Jesus to walk on water. He was using walking on water to get to Jesus. He wasn't, the end of the story is not that Peter got to walk on water. The end of the story is that he got close enough to Jesus that when he actually did go underneath the ground, underneath the water, Jesus could just reach down and pick him up. That's how close to Jesus he got. That's the point of the story. Not that you got to walk on water. Peter's like, "I don't care about walking on water. I almost died in water too, kind of thing. Like, that's no, but I got to be out there with Jesus." The point of the story is he got to go to Jesus. And I would encourage you guys, you do whatever it takes to go to Jesus. Do whatever it takes to go to Jesus. And sometimes that means that there will be a storm. And it will be hard. You have to put your own life at risk, your own future at risk. But he's good there. He's good there. He'll hold you. He'll catch you. Even when you mess it up there, he'll put you back up in the boat when the whole thing's over. Right? Jesus is the only security in this world. Jesus is the only security in life. Jesus is the only hope. Jesus is the only good. Right? I think we have to relearn that in 2022. With the ease of which our minds and attentions have gone to a lot of different things, a lot of other places. Where maybe we have realized that the United States of America is not our Savior. That Jesus is in fact our Savior. That the hope of life is not the great economy or some type of wonderful retirement or even the hope that somehow or another the government will bail us out of all of our problems. That really it is only Jesus, and that someday, right, if the Lord tarries, we're all going to have to face our own storm, the thing that threatens our life last, with the hope and the faith that Jesus is sufficient, and all of this was for him anyway. Right? Don't let anything hinder you from going to Jesus. Nothing at all. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Well, verse 30, it says here, when he saw, Peter, saw that the wind was boisterous, as if he didn't see that before. I mean, he'd been rowing at the wind. He's been rowing through this wind for 8 hours. He'd been holding this boat in place for 9 hours. Like he didn't see that before. And he got distracted. And he saw that the wind was boisterous. It says there, look, he was afraid. He was afraid. He's afraid because he feels at this point that the wind and likely the storm are a threat to his safety. Maybe even a threat to his own life. A threat to his future. A threat to whatever hope he had. Right? Now, it's remarkable for a lot of us. Like, hey, I'll take that first step. We can get out there kind of thing. But then you realize you got out in the storm. Like, what did I do? What did I do? I signed up for this. This is what I said this is what God wanted me to do. And now here I am and I'm going to die. God didn't know that when he called me to this. God didn't know that when he led me into this. God didn't know. I was like, God, you pushed me out in this storm and I am going to die. You called me to come walk to you on the water. Now I'm going to die. He wasn't going to die. Jesus wouldn't have allowed him to come out on the water just merely to kill him. There's a lot of other ways to knock Peter off. He didn't need to do it that way, kind of thing, right? That's not God's intended purpose. I'm going to bring you out here. I'm just going to drown and you're just going to die. Like there's no intended purpose in it. No good in it at all. It's not how God works. But that's what Peter feels. And when faced with his own mortality, faced with his own life, his response is that he gets to be afraid. He gets to be afraid. Now, remarkably, we'll find here it says that when he was beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and then rebuked him, right? Which means that he had gotten close enough to Jesus to be within arm's length. And that's when he starts to get afraid. Which seems to indicate, and we'll see as Christ responds to him, that it's merely the result of getting his focus off on the wrong thing. Rather than remaining enamored by Jesus, rather than remaining excited about Jesus, rather than remaining focused on going to Jesus, he started thinking about the waves. He started considering other things. Oh, wait, I'm on water, right? It's remarkable, by the way, in the Gospel of Mark, no mention of this account. John doesn't mention Peter walking on the water. Only Matthew records it. It's almost when Peter would talk to Mark about writing the gospel, he would say, do not put that in there. Matthew's like, I'm putting it in there. You can't stop me, kind of thing. I want everybody to know this. It's a great scene, right? And Peter would not he would not boast in that in any way, because in some ways it was his own failure that's the greatest lesson in the whole story. But he had gotten his attention onto something else. Jesus says in verse 31, oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt Doubt there is literally to stand uncertainly at two ways. It's the picture of a man who has a decision to make at a fork in the road. And that moment where he is trying to decide, do I go left? Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go right? That he's doubting. He's questioning. He's wondering. Now, remarkably for Peter, listen, this happens for all of us. Remarkably for Peter, he was going this way. The road, signs, Jesus, right? Jesus in 4 steps, right? Jesus in 3 steps. That's what the signs would say if there were signs up along the road. Jesus in 2 steps. Jesus in 1 step. You've arrived at Jesus, population 1, kind of thing. You would see those signs. He would get there. The road was one way. And he had walked and he had walked and he had walked and he had come into Christ's presence within arm's reach. And then all of a sudden, another road pops up. Pew. And you're like, there's another road. It was always another road. You just hadn't seen it yet. It had always been there. But his focus had blocked out the other road. He had disregarded it up until that point. But now all of a sudden, there's another road. And Peter's looking at this and wondering, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Now I have a choice. And rather than immediately saying, I'm disregarding the other road, I don't care about the wind, the storms, I made it this far, I'm just going to keep going to Jesus, he starts to question. He starts to question, can he really do this? Can he keep me above the water? I know he got me above the water to this point, but maybe he can't keep me from here on out. And he starts to doubt. And with that, he goes down. Now, it's a rebuke in some ways, obviously, that he didn't stay focused and he didn't keep his mind in going to Jesus. I mean, he should have gone out to Jesus, held Jesus by the hand, or death grip on his neck or something, kind of. He should have gone all the way, got there and said, okay, now what do you want to do, Jesus? Why don't you and I get to the shore and let these guys finish the rest of their rowing, kind of thing. Like, there's a lot of other ways the story could have ended, right? If he had gotten all the way to Jesus. He stopped a little bit short and didn't quite complete the story. Now, the positive side is he's the only one who tried to walk on the water. So there's good and bad in this in some ways. There's success and failure, obviously, for Peter in both of these things. But he did doubt. And I think it's a recognition, I think, that we all have to make in our lives. That there are things, options, opportunities, roads, other considerations that will pop up sometimes at the most inopportune time. That we will have to consider and then surrender to keep moving towards Jesus. We don't have many things in our lives that threaten our mortality, that threaten our own safety. We don't have many things. You get to oftentimes later in your life, and you deal with doctors and specialists, and eventually somebody tells you got something that this may be the thing that takes you out, right? If you don't take care of your high cholesterol, you don't take care of your blood pressure, you don't take care of this thing, it may be the thing that starts taking. And then you get a little further along, and it's, the congestive heart failures and the diabetes, and there are other considerations that you're going to have to. And then finally, a doctor says, "Well, I'm going to give you six weeks." Oftentimes, those situations in our lives are limited or reduced or pushed off to some future date that when you're in your 40s or 30s or 20s, that you try to act as if they will never happen, or certainly you're praying for the rapture to come before they actually do, right? Which we all are, right? We should be just fine. I would love to be the only generation of the church that didn't have to die, right? So all of other heaven can be jealous. That's my selfishness, but that's the way it goes, right? But every now and then something happens in life where you have to consider your own mortality. And I think in some ways, 2020 COVID was that for all of us. Where many of us had to consider the fact that maybe this would be the thing that would take us out. And I have to admit to a certain degree that there are portions of the church, or maybe even portions in my own life, where we saw people in some ways walk on water. kept their focus on Jesus. They grew in the Lord. I think in some ways it can be a great catalyst to growing in the Lord. Trusting God, seeking God, desiring God, wanting to grow in God. Saying, listen, if I'm going to die in 6 months, let's die doing God stuff, right? Let's be busy occupying until he comes. This is not a permanent gig. This is earth, right? Let's not make sure I don't want to waste time. I'm going to share the gospel with everybody in my family that needs to hear it. I'm going to do the things that are important for me, and I'm going to do it now because I don't know that I'm going to live past, getting the next COVID round of whatever kind of thing. And that might take me out, and I want to make sure that I am on point, that I've done exactly what God wants me to do at every point, because it may not last that much longer, right? If an asteroid is coming to the earth to kill the earth, to destroy the earth, for the Christian who's walking right in the center of God's will, it should change absolutely nothing except the urgency to complete the mission that God's called them to do. It should change nothing. I'm not doing anything. I'm doing exactly what God wants me to do, and I just want to do it better than I did the day before, knowing that this might be the last day. For some, I think that's produced that kind of result. I think for many, and maybe for all of us at some point, it's also put this to the test. Can we keep walking? Do we still most care about Jesus? Do we know what our ministry is and how to be faithful to it until the end? Do phrases like, for me to live as Christ and to die as gain, do they still mean what we thought they meant when we memorized that verse when we were, 18, 22 years old? For me to live as Christ, to die as gain, right? I do not count my life dear unto myself, that only that I may finish my race, that I may complete my ministry. That's all I want. And you get into your 40s and COVID hits and you're like, I don't know if I want that much anymore. I would also like to be healthy. I would also like to live a long life. I would also like to figure out where my retirement's going to come from, or if the government's going to stand, or what's going to happen in American politics. I would like to know all of that stuff too. And I will just tell you this, that if you get your eyes off of Jesus onto the waves, you are going down. You are going down. Now, that's not the end of the story, thankfully. God doesn't say, keep your eyes on me or you're going to die. Keep your eyes on me. One chance at this, you mess it up, it's over, right? This church would be like 3 of us. And not us. I would not be here, right? 3 of you. Somebody else would be doing this who did it perfectly, because I have not. There have been times I've gotten distracted. I've seen other things. I've gotten preoccupied looking at waves and forgotten that my life is motivated by walking towards Jesus. And I've gone down. Now, beautifully, when you've done that a few times, you realize that he's still there, right? And he doesn't need a long prayer. You don't even have to say things, right? Just say, God help. Help! Save me! That was Peter's prayer. Lord, save me. Right? Somebody wrote a book years ago, The Beauty of Short Prayers. Right? Some of the greatest prayers in all the Bible are like 3 words. Lord, save me. Help! Jesus reaches down. Now, church history says that Peter is a big man. Like burly, stocky, strong. Even in his older age, he was not the youngest disciple. Jesus reaches to this man who's going underwater. Have you ever lifted somebody out of water? Right? You're just dead weight right out of the water. They're not helping you at all, right? They're just, I'm going to die kind of thing. And you just grab them by the arm or the hair. That's what they teach, right? Lifeguards, hair is a great handle, right? If they're drowning, they don't care. You grab what you can grab and you pull them to the surface. Right? Reach down, grab Peter, brings him back up and puts him back onto the top of the water. What kind of strength is that? Puts him back out. He caught him. He rescued him. It's remarkable. Peter, as long as he kept Jesus in view, he was just fine, even when he was sinking. Right? Isn't it remarkable? He starts to sink. He's not like, no, wait, I think I'm sinking. I mean, by the way, how slow did that go? Did it all happen all at once and the bottom just drop out and he's like, ah, kind of thing? Or was it like a slow sink, like, my faith is slowly leaving me kind of thing? What's going on here? I don't know. But Jesus, I think I need some help over here kind of thing. Help, and finally Jesus rescued. We don't know. We don't know how that played out. Right? But even when he was falling, in some ways, he was safer when he was falling because he was crying out to Jesus than when he was standing on the sea looking at the waves. Because then it was only a matter of time until he would drown. As long as he had Jesus in view, as long as he was looking to Jesus, talking to Jesus, and being with Jesus, he was fine. Lord, save me. So Jesus rescues him and says, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Now, I was going to do the next section, 34 to 36. We're saving that for next week, okay? We'll change in plans. Because it's important to realize what happens on the backside of this, right? John chapter 6 tells us that when Peter and Jesus get into the boat, which means, by the way, that Jesus is still on the water, hiking Peter up over the side of the boat. And the disciples are reaching down and they're helping to get Peter in. Because he's not just stepping into the boat. He has to be placed into the boat. And then Jesus has to be lifted up into the boat or just jumps off or whatever, kind of thing. His vertical's okay. Jesus' vertical's okay. So he just gets out of and he's in the water and, and then he's in the boat. As soon as Peter and Jesus get in the boat, immediately it's on the shore where they were going to Bethsaida. Like that. They'd taken 8 hours to get to the middle of the sea, and they took less than a second to get from the middle to the shore. Which means that as long as Jesus is in your boat, you can get to wherever you want to go, right? Or actually wherever he wants to go. That's not the challenge in this evening. Was not that. The challenge in this evening was perspective, was focus. What were they looking at? What were they living for? What were they desiring? What were they wanting? Right? To make Jesus the bread king? Well, that's not the Jesus who came to minister to these disciples. They were missing the point altogether. Now they recognize here in verse 33, and one of the first admissions of the disciples, of the fact that Jesus is in fact the Son of God. In some ways, they understand him more now at the end of this storm than they had done at the end of the feeding of the 5,000. And that's indicated to us by the fact that during this scene, there's another group at play that we don't see in the storm. It's a very interesting kind of experiment that Jesus does here on this evening, in that he has a control group and a test group. The test group is his disciples, and they got tested in the storm. The control group are all of the other followers of Jesus, all of the other disciples that he fed with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, that wanted to make him king by force. And then Jesus said at the end of the day, just go home. We're not dealing with it anymore. But they didn't have to deal with the storm in the way that the disciples did. They just maybe got rained on a little bit. It was natural to them, normal to them. And remarkably, when Jesus and the disciples get all the way around the sea, again to Bethsaida, for the next morning, the crowds end up finding out where Jesus is, and they come to him. The same crowds he had just fed the afternoon before with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The same crowds come around to him the next morning. And what do you think they ask for? What do you think they ask for? Breakfast. Breakfast. Here we are, Jesus. We had a full meal. Now, you all know, right? When you have one of those meals where you got glutted, right? You would think, this is always what you say on Thanksgiving, by the way, right? I'm not going to eat it all tomorrow. That's a lie. It's a lie. You're probably going to end up eating like 4 times tomorrow, right? Because your body's going to tell you how hungry you are because you've expanded its resources the day before. Now you're really like, I don't know why I'm so hungry. I can't eat another thing, but I'm starving. You know how that is. Right? That's when you get your leftovers at 10:30 at night on the 3rd football game. on Thanksgiving Day, right? How can you eat another thing? I'm hungry. You're not hungry. You're delusional. But that's how it goes, right? So these guys the day before got this full meal, walked around to the other side. They meet Jesus and the disciples coming out of the storm, and they look at Jesus and say, breakfast? What do you got? Like some bacon, some Canadian bacon, there was no Canadian bacon, by the way, back then. Some French toast, make some eggs. Come on, Jesus. You had 8 hours to plan dinner. Come on now, let's do this. And Jesus is looking at them and said, I will not feed you. Because you have not realized that it's not the bread that I give you that sustains your life, but that in fact I am the bread of life. And the whole John 6 teaching grows out of that. At the end of that teaching, John 6, verse 66, it's the only 666 in the Bible, by the way. John, verse 6, 66 says that many of those disciples, because Jesus did not give them what they wanted, left off following him. Less than a day before, he had fed all of them, 5 loaves and 2 fish. 24 hours later, the majority of the individuals that he had fed the day before are leaving him. If this is the way it is, then forget it. This is too hard. Blah, 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 blah. I don't understand. Eat my body, drink my blood. I don't get it. It's not making sense. You're a sadist. You're a masochist. I don't know. There's no way. Forget it. I'm just leaving. Remarkably then, Jesus asks one more question. And he looks at his disciples, the 12. They're probably still wet, by the way. He looks at the disciples and he says to them, do you guys want to leave too? Right? It's worse, by the way, than a church split. This is a church disintegration, right? In 5,000, he's looking at 12 or 15 more people. Back to the good old days, and it was just a couple of us kind of thing, like the way we got started here, kind of thing. Right? And so you don't want to go too and just close up shop? Who speaks up? Peter. Peter speaks up. And he says, Lord, where else are we going to go? You alone have the words of life. Peter had learned something in the storm that the rest of the multitudes had missed because they did not get storm lesson 101. That the point of all of it is Jesus. Not bread, not a nice life, not understanding all of the P's and Q's about how everything's going to go down. Jesus. If God is taking you through a storm, it just so may be that you can know him in a way you've never known him before, and that you can grow to trust him in a way that you've never trusted him before, so that when you get to the place where others are bagging out on Jesus, and they are, it's happening all around us right now. For all kinds of other things. That you can look at Jesus and say, listen, I ain't going anywhere. You alone have the words of eternal life. Where else are we going to go? You learn those lessons in storms in ways that you do not learn those lessons in blessing. We can all wish for blessing, right? Out of this day, no doubt, for all of us, in Matthew 14, the 3 scenes that we've seen so far, the beheading of John the Baptist, the feeding of the 5,000, and then the disciples in the storm, the scene that we would vote probably most to be involved in, to do, to watch, to experience for ourselves, probably would be feeding of the 5,000. Lord, I need more provision. I need more stuff. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough security. I don't have enough guarantee. I don't have enough help. I need more. I need more provision, more from his hand. The thing that benefits us the most are the things that cause us to realize that it's not what comes from his hand that we need the most. It's actually just him that we need the most. I do not know why this is so hard for us to get until almost it's too late. For the marriage workshop that we're putting together in February. I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously. Is that I think one of the great bases for a good marriage is appreciation. And I think that one of the things that causes people to appreciate their marriage is the idea that it doesn't last forever. I've heard a lot of people with a lot of regrets regarding their marriages and regarding their families on their last days on their deathbeds. I wish I had done this better. I wish I'd done that. I've never heard anybody say, I wish I'd taken more overtime. Never once, right? I wish I had made more money. No, because the kids are already fighting over it. You're still in the bed. They're fighting over your money. It just doesn't work that way. I wish I'd spent more time. I wish I had made a higher priority. I wish I had valued more the things that I now value in wishing that my wife was here, or my kids were here, my family was here with me in these last days. If in some ways we could live every day as if it was our last, we would be far better off. Because in the last days, in the last moments, it seems in some ways that life oftentimes comes into much greater clarity. You realize in some ways what life is all about. Right? Remember when Julie was in the hospital? I didn't care about what she didn't do. I didn't care about what she could give me. I didn't care about, all I cared about was Julie. I am just going to miss Julie. That's all that matters. Right? Someday in heaven, all that's going to matter. Just Jesus. Right? Somebody from this side met us then. They're going to say, oh, but there are walls of jewels, streets of gold. And we're going to say building materials and asphalt. It's nonsense. None of it matters. It's all kind of ambiance for being with Jesus. That's all that matters. If in some ways we lived every day of our lives with that reality in mind, we would be much better off. But it's a hard thing to hold on to. There's a lot of other voices, a lot of other influences, and a lot of other desires that creep into our hearts and our minds and say, well, you need this, and what about this? And this, if you don't do this, you're going to die, right? It's too early yet, but in 5 or 10 years, we're going to make all kinds of jokes about COVID. Remember when we did that? How silly, right? In the same way we look back at Middle Eastern or Middle Age, medicine. Remember when they leeched people? Remember when they did? Like how silly. And it's just the limitations of the human mind. We just don't know. We're not that smart. We don't know. And it's okay. We don't need to. What we need is what we'll in fact endure. To be with Jesus. Right? If you will, let's stand. Let's pray.
The story doesn't end with Peter walking on water. That was never the point. The real miracle is that he got close enough to Jesus that when he started to sink, Jesus only had to reach out his hand. Peter didn't celebrate the water, he celebrated the one he met on it. And the invitation is the same for us. Do whatever it takes to get to Jesus. Even if it means stepping into storms, risking comfort, facing fears, or walking into places you can't stand without him. And when we begin to sink, he's close enough to catch us. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for joining us. This is the Word for the Valley podcast. So long, everyone.